I'm Dr. Amelia Stone, and if you have high blood pressure, there's a very good chance you've been told the same thing almost everyone hears: cut the salt. And yes, that advice sounds logical. It's simple, familiar, and easy to repeat. But here's the problem. For a huge number of people, that advice is incomplete, and sometimes it's so incomplete that it distracts them from the real reason their blood pressure is high in the first place. Because if salt were the whole story, then lowering salt would solve the problem for almost everyone. But that's not what we see in real life. We see people who barely use the salt shaker and still struggle with high readings. We see people who clean up their diet, avoid obvious salty foods, and yet their blood pressure stays stubbornly elevated. And we also see the opposite. People who eat more sodium than they should, but their blood pressure doesn't spike nearly as much as expected. That tells you something important right away. The issue is not always just how much sodium you eat. The deeper issue is how your body responds to sodium, how your kidneys handle it, what your blood vessels are doing, what your hormones are doing, and whether your metabolism is quietly pushing your pressure up all day long. So in this video, I want to walk you through the hidden reason your blood pressure may be high. And I say hidden reason because most of the time this isn't one dramatic cause. It's a pattern. It's a combination of nutrient imbalances, hormonal signals, insulin resistance, stress responses, poor sleep, and early vascular dysfunction that often goes unnoticed for years. And once you see that pattern, your blood pressure starts to make a lot more sense. Now, before we go deeper, let's be fair to the salt question. Sodium can absolutely raise blood pressure. That part is true. Sodium pulls water into the bloodstream, which can increase blood volume. More volume can mean more pressure pushing against the walls of your arteries. That's basic physiology. But what usually gets left out is what happens next in a healthy body. If your kidneys are functioning well, if your hormones are balanced, and if your blood vessels can still relax the way they're supposed to, your body can often get rid of that extra sodium and extra water. Blood pressure rises temporarily, then comes back down. That's why salt sensitivity varies so much from person to person. Some people react strongly to sodium, others barely react at all. So when someone's blood pressure stays high day after day, the real question is not just, how much salt are they eating? The better question is, why is their body struggling to handle normal physiologic stress in the first place? And one of the most overlooked answers is magnesium. Magnesium is one of the quietest, most important minerals in the body. It doesn't get the same attention as sodium, cholesterol, or blood sugar, but it influences all of them. When it comes to blood pressure, magnesium matters because it helps blood vessels relax. It supports nitric oxide signaling, it affects vascular tone, and it helps keep the muscles in your artery walls from staying overly tight and constricted. Think about that for a second. If your blood vessels can't relax properly, then your heart has to pump against more resistance all day long. And if that resistance is high enough, your blood pressure rises. Not because you made one bad choice at dinner, but because the system itself is stuck in a more narrowed, tense state. The reason this matters so much is because low magnesium is incredibly common. Modern diets are filled with ultra-processed foods, refined grains, sugar-heavy snacks, and packaged convenience meals that are calorie-dense but mineral-poor. Even foods that used to provide more minerals may not be as rich as they once were, especially when diets are built around highly processed ingredients. And on top of that, some people lose more magnesium than they realize. This can happen with poorly controlled blood sugar, certain medications, ongoing stress, digestive issues, and even heavy alcohol intake. What makes magnesium especially tricky is that it can be low where it matters even when routine testing doesn't make the problem obvious. That means people can walk around with chronic suboptimal magnesium status and never connect it to headaches, muscle tension, palpitations, poor sleep, or rising blood pressure. And here's where this becomes more than theory. Research has shown that magnesium supplementation can lead to modest but meaningful improvements in blood pressure, especially in people who already have hypertension or low magnesium status. That tells us this isn't some fringe wellness idea. It's a real physiologic lever. So if your blood pressure is high, one of the smartest questions to ask is not just how much sodium you're eating. It's whether your body has enough magnesium to keep your vessels relaxed in the first place. Now let's move to the next hidden driver, and this one is massively underappreciated. Insulin. Most people think of insulin as a blood sugar hormone, and that's true, but it is also a blood pressure hormone. When insulin levels stay elevated, the kidneys tend to hold on to more sodium, and when the kidneys hold on to more sodium, they also hold on to more water. That increases blood volume and blood pressure starts creeping upward. This is one of the reasons high blood pressure is so commonly tied to weight gain around the abdomen, rising triglycerides, fatty liver, prediabetes, and type 2 diabetes. These aren't separate problems that just happen to travel together by coincidence. They are often different expressions of the same underlying metabolic dysfunction. In other words, many people do not have a pure salt problem. They have an insulin problem that creates a sodium handling problem, and that changes everything. Because if insulin resistance is part of what's driving your blood pressure, then simply lowering salt without addressing refined carbohydrates, constant snacking, sugary drinks, poor sleep, inactivity, and excess body fat may barely move the needle. You may reduce one input while the main driver keeps pushing from the background. This is why some people see their blood pressure improve before they lose much weight at all, simply by improving insulin levels. They stop grazing all day, cut the sugary drinks, reduce the refined starches, increase protein, walk after meals, sleep better, and suddenly their morning readings start falling. The body is finally letting go of sodium and fluid more appropriately again. And that brings us to an even more specific culprit hiding inside the modern diet. Fructose. Fructose is a simple sugar, but in today's food environment, it shows up everywhere. It's in sweetened drinks, desserts, sauces, packaged snacks, breakfast foods, syrups, and countless products people don't even think of as sugary. When people hear sugar, they often think about glucose and diabetes. But fructose has its own story, and part of that story involves blood pressure. Here's why. High fructose intake can increase uric acid. An elevated uric acid is not just something you hear about in gout. It may also matter in hypertension. Higher uric acid can contribute to endothelial dysfunction, which means the inner lining of your blood vessels doesn't work as well as it should. When that happens, nitric oxide signaling drops, vessels relax less effectively, and pressure tends to rise. At the same time, fructose-related metabolic changes may promote greater sodium absorption and make the whole system more salt-sensitive. So now imagine the combination. A person is eating more processed food, more hidden sugar, less potassium, less magnesium, sleeping poorly, moving less, and developing insulin resistance. They think they have a sodium problem because their pressure is high. But the bigger reality is that their metabolism has shifted in a way that makes normal blood pressure much harder to maintain. This is why high blood pressure often feels so stubborn. People are trying to fix the last visible symptom instead of the earlier hidden drivers. And yes, for some people, cutting sugar and ultra-processed food has a bigger effect on blood pressure than obsessing over the salt shaker ever did. Now let's talk about potassium, because if sodium gets all the attention, potassium is the mineral standing quietly in the corner, doing some of the most important work. Potassium helps counterbalance sodium. It supports vasodilation, which means it helps blood vessels relax. It also helps the body excrete sodium in the urine. That means potassium doesn't just look good on a lab report. It plays a direct role in blood pressure regulation. The problem is that most modern diets are loaded with sodium and poor in potassium. That's the opposite of the environment your body handles best. The typical person today eats more packaged food, restaurant food, fast food, refined grain products, processed meats, and convenience meals, while eating fewer vegetables, legumes, fruits, and minimally processed whole foods. So they get the sodium burden without the potassium buffer. And over time, that imbalance becomes a problem. This is one reason whole food dietary patterns help blood pressure so reliably. They don't just cut out junk, they naturally bring potassium back up. They also increase fiber, lower insulin demand, improve fullness, reduce excess calories, and often improve magnesium intake at the same time. It's not one magic food. It's a shift in the overall mineral and metabolic environment. Good potassium sources include beans, lentils, potatoes, sweet potatoes, leafy greens, yogurt, squash, tomatoes, avocados, and many fruits. But this does come with one important caution. Not everyone should push potassium aggressively on their own. People with kidney disease, certain endocrine problems, or those taking specific medications need personalized guidance. So this is not about taking random supplements because you heard the word potassium in a video. It's about understanding that blood pressure is strongly influenced by the sodium to potassium balance, not sodium alone. Now here's another hidden reason. Blood pressure stays high that many people never suspect. Your nervous system may be stuck in overdrive. We like to think stress is a vague emotional topic, but the body treats stress as chemistry. When stress becomes chronic, your sympathetic nervous system stays more active. Your heart rate may run higher. Your blood vessels may stay tighter. Stress hormones change how you handle blood sugar, sleep, appetite, inflammation, and blood vessel tone. And if this goes on long enough, elevated blood pressure stops being a temporary reaction and starts becoming your baseline. This is why some people do everything right, nutritionally, and still have readings that spike every morning, every workday, or every night. Their body isn't just processing food. It's processing pressure, urgency, sleep debt, worry, overstimulation, and a lifestyle that never fully comes down from alert mode. And that leads into something even more specific. Poor sleep doesn't just help you feel rested. Sleep helps regulate blood pressure. During healthy sleep, your cardiovascular system gets a chance to shift into a quieter state. Blood pressure typically dips. Heart rate slows. Stress signaling comes down. But if sleep is short, fragmented, or low quality, that normal nighttime recovery doesn't happen the way it should. And then there's obstructive sleep apnea, one of the most overlooked contributors to persistent hypertension. People think of sleep apnea as loud snoring, But the real issue is repeated drops in oxygen, repeated stress activation, and repeated surges of pressure through the night. Those events can keep the nervous system activated long after morning arrives. In resistant hypertension, sleep apnea is extremely common. This means someone can eat less sodium, try to be healthier, even take medication, and still struggle because the real driver is happening every night while they sleep. That's why symptoms like loud snoring, waking unrefreshed, dry mouth in the morning headaches, daytime fatigue, and witnessed pauses in breathing should never be ignored. Now let's go one level deeper, because there's another hidden reason blood pressure can stay high even when people are trying hard. Hormone imbalance. One of the most important examples is primary aldosteronism. This is a condition where the body produces too much aldosterone, a hormone that tells the kidneys to retain sodium and lose potassium. If aldosterone is excessive, blood pressure rises because the body keeps holding on to volume. This is not rare in people with difficult to control hypertension. In resistant cases, it may account for a significant percentage. Why does this matter? Because if someone has primary aldosteronism and no one looks for it, they may spend years being told the problem is just salt, stress, age, or bad luck. Meanwhile, the real issue is a treatable hormonal driver that keeps telling the kidneys to hold on to sodium, no matter how disciplined the person tries to be. And this is exactly why the just cut salt advice can be so misleading. It makes people feel like they failed when the truth is, their physiology may be pushing hard in the opposite direction. There are other medical reasons blood pressure may rise too. Kidney disease can impair sodium and fluid handling. Thyroid problems can contribute. Some medications can raise blood pressure. Excess alcohol can raise it. Chronic pain can raise it. Even something as basic as deconditioning can make the whole cardiovascular system less resilient. That's why high blood pressure should never be treated as one generic condition with one generic explanation. But if I had to summarize the hidden pattern behind so many cases, it would be this. Blood pressure goes up when the body becomes less able to relax blood vessels, less able to excrete sodium appropriately, and more likely to stay in a chronically stressed, insulin-resistant, inflamed, hormonally imbalanced state. Once you understand that, the plan becomes much more strategic. Instead of asking only, how do I eat less salt? You start asking better questions. Am I eating a diet that is draining me of magnesium and potassium? Am I consuming enough ultra-processed food and hidden sugar to keep insulin high all day? Is fructose from drinks and packaged foods quietly driving uric acid and endothelial dysfunction? Am I sleeping well enough for my pressure to reset at night? Could sleep apnea be part of this? Am I under constant stress with no true recovery? If my pressure is resistant, has anyone considered a hormonal cause like excess aldosterone? Those questions get you closer to the root cause. So what can you do right now? First, clean up the obvious metabolic drivers, remove the liquid sugar. Cut back hard on sweetened drinks, desserts, syrups, and the packaged foods that keep insulin elevated. You do not need a perfect diet overnight, but you do need to reduce the foods most likely to distort blood sugar, raise uric acid, and promote sodium retention. Second, rebuild your plate around mineral-rich, minimally processed foods. Think leafy greens, beans, lentils, nuts, seeds, yogurt, vegetables, fruit, potatoes, and whole food meals that naturally increase potassium and magnesium while lowering your dependence on processed food. Third, respect protein and fiber. Meals built around adequate protein and fiber tend to improve satiety, help reduce overeating, smooth blood sugar responses, and make it easier to stop the constant snack cycle that keeps insulin elevated from morning to night. Fourth, move every day. Not because exercise burns calories, but because movement improves insulin sensitivity, vascular function, and blood pressure regulation. Even regular walking makes a difference, especially after meals. Fifth, protect sleep like it matters, because it does. If you snore heavily, wake up exhausted, or have resistant high blood pressure, do not brush that off. Sleep apnea can be a major missing piece. Sixth, be cautious about self-treating with supplements. Magnesium may help some people. Potassium matters greatly, but supplementing potassium can be dangerous in the wrong setting. So this is where working with a qualified clinician matters, especially if you have kidney disease, take blood pressure medication, or have other health conditions. And finally, don't make the mistake of waiting until blood pressure has been high for years. The earlier you address the drivers, the more reversible this often is. Over time, elevated pressure damages blood vessels, arteries become stiffer, the system becomes less flexible, and once that structural damage sets in, high blood pressure becomes harder to unwind. That's why the goal is not just to chase a number. The goal is to remove the reasons the number became abnormal in the first place. Because the hidden reason your blood pressure is high may not be what you were told. It may not be the salt shaker sitting on your table. It may be the magnesium your body is missing. It may be the insulin that stays elevated all day. It may be the fructose and uric acid burden from a modern processed diet. It may be the low potassium pattern that leaves sodium unopposed. It may be the nightly stress of sleep apnea. It may be a hormone problem no one has checked. And once you identify the right driver, everything changes. Suddenly, your blood pressure is no longer some random curse that appeared out of nowhere. It becomes a message, a signal, a clue that the body is under strain in a specific way. That is good news, because clues can be followed, mechanisms can be understood, drivers can be addressed. So yes, sodium matters. But sodium is often just the surface of the story. The deeper story is how your kidneys, vessels, hormones, nerves, and metabolism are interacting every single day. And when you start fixing that deeper story, blood pressure often stops feeling mysterious. It starts making sense. I'm Dr. Amelia Stone. If this helped you see high blood pressure in a completely different way, remember this: don't just ask what raises blood pressure. Ask what makes the body unable to bring it back down. That's usually where the real answer is. And that's the hidden reason so many people stay stuck. Not because they were never trying, but because they were aiming at the symptom while the real cause stayed hidden in the background. Find the cause, and the number finally starts to move in the right direction.